There is a story out of LifeSite News that I found very troubling today that I want to talk about. USCCB memo reveals women identifying as trans men infiltrated seminaries. Let that sink in for a moment. Absolutely insane. A USCCB memo suggests that DNA tests and medical exams should be instituted to stop any further incidents. This is reported at LifeSite News, by the way. A United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, USCCB memo, has suggested bishops consider DNA tests and medical examinations for admittance to seminary and religious life after multiple women identifying themselves as men were admitted to seminaries and houses of formation. Okay. I find that fascinating. Like, one, how did they even get through? Like, were they that convincing? Like, you weren't able to, like, there was nothing on the radar that would suggest maybe we ought to ask a question here? I don't know. Maybe I've never been in walked a mile in their shoes. Maybe it's possible that that is the case, but I find it hard to believe.
Yeah, one thing about this, which I think is hilarious and horrifying, is that whenever I was applying to the novitiate, we were required to have a physical done. We were required to go through a psychological evaluation. We were required to do jump through all these hoops, have a background check on us, submit our birth certificate. All this information was provided. And I know a vast majority of seminaries do this. So that's what's blowing my mind. How on earth? Because like the article is saying that they should probably implement some kind of DNA testing. Yeah. But we already have physical, psychological evaluations, right. And submitting our birth certificate, right? And nobody figured this out.
Or maybe they did, and then this is why they're saying this. Maybe along the way they're like, "Hey, we're finding some issues here." The article goes on to say the memo issued by Milwaukee Archbishop Jerome Listecki, head of the USCCB's Committee on Canonical Affairs and Church Governance, on September the 22nd, states that the committee was recently, quote, made aware of instances where it had been discovered that a woman living under a transgender identity had been unknowingly admitted to the seminary or to a house of formation of an institute of consecrated life, unquote. It is not specified whether or not the seminaries and houses of formation were in the United States or elsewhere, nor is it specified how often such incidents occurred. The article goes on to say, the memo mentions an instance in which, quote, sacramental records had been fraudulently obtained to reflect the individual's new identity, unquote. In all instances, however, nothing in these individuals' medical or psychological reports had signaled past treatments or pertinent surgeries, unquote. None of the women identifying themselves as men had yet attempted holy orders. Well, praise be to God for that. I mean, I'm glad they caught all of these instances, but it makes me wonder, was there an attempt here to circumvent church teaching and natural law to force the issue of women priests? I'm wondering if one could interview some of these ladies in transgendered situations, whether or not there was a motivation there. Sort of an in-round kind of a thing. It's pure speculation on my part. There's nothing to suggest this in the article. I'm just wondering it out loud. Listecki, the article goes on to say, Listecki, a doctor of canon law, stated that, quote, canon law requires the diocesan bishop to admit to the major seminary and promote to holy orders only men who possess the requisite physical and psychological qualities, unquote, needed for ministry. He went on to point out that bishops can canonically, quote, require various means to establish moral certitude in this regard, unquote. Listecki also stated that some members of the committee have suggested that, quote, a bishop should consider requiring a DNA test or, at a minimum, certification from a medical expert of the bishop's own choosing to assure an applicant is male, unquote. We live in a world where we now have to have medical experts, DNA tests, to ensure that someone is male. We live in very interesting times. Great holiness is needed and required. This blows my mind. This utterly blows my mind. But almost as much as it blows my mind about this guy from Pennsylvania, also reported over at LifeSite News. Pennsylvania Democrat attacks pro-life law with satirical bill to mandate vasectomies. Good grief, I should learn to speak English. To mandate vasectomies. The stunt unwittingly demonstrated multiple falsehoods and fallacies in pro-abortion talking points. This is all reported over at LifeSite News. This caught my attention because essentially the story was that this particular Democrat lawmaker out of Pennsylvania was proposing a bill that suggested that all men have to have the vasectomy either after they've had their third child or by their 40th birthday. When I saw this and was sent to me via Janice on Twitter, and it wasn't there was no satirical element to that post. It seemed like this person really wanted this, and that blew my mind. I'm thinking, this is China right here in America, but LifeSite's pointing out that this is probably just a protest against the heartbeat bill in Texas. The article says, a Pennsylvania Democrat lawmaker is attempting to take a satirical swipe at a Texas law banning the vast majority of abortions by introducing legislation that would force men to undergo vasectomies upon reaching their third child or 40th birthday. Quote, for far too long, the public debate around abortion, contraception, and related reproductive matters has thrust government into the center of restrictions on the bodily autonomy of women and girls, unquote. But, quote, rarely is there a meaningful dialogue around public policy focusing on the personal responsibility of cisgender men in this sphere, unquote, State Rep Christopher Robb declared in his October the 2nd statement.
Because there are other kind of men, right?
Well, a couple things is bodily autonomy. How many times must we say this? The child in the womb has its own body. And when a heartbeat is detected, viability is, beyond the issue of, life begins at conception. There's that. But there's the issue of its own body, its own viability, and they keep repeating the same nonsense over and over again. And the whole cisgender male, thank you for purporting a racist and gender ideology. Yeah, because natural law applies to all human beings, not just the Catholic ones. Okay, all human beings are subjects of God's natural law. And what do we mean by that? What we mean is that when we were made male and female, he created them. What's the first command he gave to male and female? To become married, to get married to each other, to be fruitful and have children, and to occupy the earth, to be good stewards of this planet through marriage between a man and a woman. And yet we see the continued lies and falsehoods being perpetuated there.